So today is our last day, and unfortunately we weren't able to finish the whole discourse. We still have like another 7 chapters left, but we actually covered a lot of topics in this 2 weeks. And today we're going to speak about, hopefully, about 3 topics that we have mentioned before, we have touched upon, but we're gonna first see it a little bit also in the text, and also to understand a little better these 3 topics. So first we're going to speak about what we spoke in pretty much in length yesterday, about how what makes in the change is in what. So if God, we started this discussion about God's knowledge, right? And we said if God knows, then that knowledge changes him, because he was different before he knew it, and he will be different after he knows it. And there, for this question, the Rambam said, no, his knowledge is not quite similar to our type of knowledge. Him and his knowledge are the same. Him, the knower, the knowledge, and the thing that he knows is all one. So it's very hard to comprehend, but it's actually not doing any change in him. And the Maharal said, no. You cannot say that, because knowledge per definition is a type of thing that makes the knower concentrate on a certain thing to be known, and it makes it mukdar, as we said it. It makes it, it defines it in a certain category. And therefore the Maharal says he's definitely above any type of knowledge. He's above logic. The whole system of logic and the whole system of any system is a created concept. And he explains that this is the idea of Sefirot, of the first attributes of God, godliness, that are not a determined existence. They are concepts that are created by God as a first step for creation. So in order to create something outside of him, he first created these ideas in order to create through them. So we gave different examples, different metaphors for this. We said we try to use a metaphor of somebody building a house. So until the physical house comes out, it starts off from him. It's a process that starts off from him and ends up in a house outside of him. So he doesn't only need to create, in this case, the physical house. He needs to create first the imagination in his mind about the house, how the house is going to look like. In the case of God, he needs to create also even the tools of imagination, the system of imagination, even without using it for any specific idea. So the whole system is a created system, and therefore God himself doesn't change. Not only God himself as his essence doesn't change, but his light even doesn't change, because his reflection even doesn't change. So it's not only him he doesn't change, even his reflection doesn't change. The only thing that changes is from the perspective of the receiver, that sees God, actually sees God's reflection through a certain medium. And what changes this perception is just the medium. So if you're gonna make a sunlight go through a certain color glass, from the other side of the glass it's going to look like that color. If you make it go through blue color, blue glass, the light is going to look blue. If you're going to make it go through red, it's going to look red. The light itself doesn't change. You can give it a try, take away the glass, and the sunlight will stay the same. What changes is the medium. Then we had a whole question about the medium itself. Where does the medium come from? And we had a whole discussion about that. We compared it to letters and words that are a medium for the reflection of our minds, the light of our minds, so-called, ideas. And where do these mediums of words and letters come from? We said ultimately it also comes from the light itself. When we take away the light, what's left is a little traces of some gibberish, but then we can we can bring back light to these traces, and they give them life. So similarly, this is the idea of Kalim. This is more or less what we discussed yesterday. And today we're going to break this up to three different topics. And I hope we will be able to cover all three. We shouldn't get lost in this whole thing. So first we will speak about the Sefirot. And what we will speak about, what are they? How do they serve as a medium to the godly light? How are they not an independent existence? That's the first topic we will deal with. Second topic will be this idea, the difference between, which we spoke 2 days ago, the difference between Or and Shefa, light and influence. So, and we discussed why did the Kabbalist teachers call God's energy reflection of light and not influence. And then we will speak a little bit about this idea which we mentioned yesterday, is the idea of the Tzimtzum, which is the way it works is it's light, Tzimtzum, which is contraction, and then the Shimu, the letters of traces, then the Kalim, the vessels, which are the Sefirot themselves. So these will be the three topics that we will speak about today. Okay, so first let's just speak about the Sefirot. So we said, yesterday I mentioned that there is this very nice description of the Rambam I figure in Hilchos Avodah Zarah, in the Codex of Idol Worship, which practically means the Codex on how you should not worship idols and what idol worship means. And he discusses, he says, how come Abraham needed to reveal this idea of monotheism and one God, when we read in the Bible that the forefathers, or the figures before the forefathers, like Noah or Adam and Eve and Cain and Hevel, they all had some experience with God. So why did this revelation, why was it needed? Where did things get off tracks? When did people start believing in idols? And he explains that how this turn happened. He says that in the beginning people thought, yes, there is one creator, it's true, there is one God, but he uses mediums in order to convey his energy to the creation, to the creatures. And in general, they mostly mention the different forces of nature that are like mediums. So the stars, the sun, the waters, the different forces of nature. And they said, well, these are the mediums through which God conveys us his energy. So we need to have a relationship with them. And he gives a metaphor of somebody going to somebody's house for an event. So the host is an important guy. He doesn't have time for all the guests, but there are people there that they are like the waiters that serve the people, the servants. So these servants are really not important, but they're still mediums for the influence giving there, or so let's say the food given by the event. So you're going to be nice to these servants and to these waiters, because otherwise they're just not going to serve you the good food, the good pieces of food. So you want to say thank you to them, you want to be nice to them, you want to leave them some pocket money. And this is the same idea with these mediums. They said ultimately everything comes from God. Yes, definitely. But God is too busy and is too high, is too elevated to be busy with our little needy stuff. He's not going to be looking into our things. So we need to work with in a direct way. We need to work with the mediums, and these mediums are the forces of nature. And then one step later, they already forgot many of these idol worship religions. They also already forgot of the general one God, which is above all. And that's how idol worship came to happen. People started then to just worship and serve the servants, the mediums. Now, where did this logic go wrong? It didn't only go wrong in the second step, it went wrong right at the first step, because when you say that the God created different mediums, so for example, he conveys heat through the sun, or different forces of nature convey different types of energy, that is not something which makes them an autonomous, independent existence. They are not an independent existence. They are just tools in the hands of God. So they're not like the servants in the house of the host. They're more like an ox. Ox? Is the word? No. Axe. I knew it was. And like an axe in the hands of a woodchopper. So the axe doesn't have any opinion about which wood or which tree should be cut. He's just doing he's just doing his job, but he doesn't have any free choice in this, or any decision making in its role. So so that's the idea of that's where it went wrong, because these forces of nature are not independent mediums. They are mediums, but they're not independent mediums. Now, similarly to this description is how the Tzemach Tzedek and generally Chassidus explains the idea of the Sefirot. The Sefirot are just mediums, but they're not independent mediums that have some autonomous existence. They're just really the mediums through which we see the light of God acting. It gives the materia for the energy to be seen, to be felt, to be experienced. And so this is an important point, because in some of the Kabbalistic writings, you might read a text about the Sefirot, you might read a text about these godly Sefirot, and you might think mistakenly that they are some type of independent force or independent medium. So let's see just a little bit of the text and you'll see what I mean. Look at the bottom of page 3. We are holding at section 5. bottom of page 3. The intent, this is the last line on page 3. Got it? Again, section 5, page 3. Got it? Everybody has it? So that the intent is not that the Kalim do not act independently, heaven forbid. I think there's a mistake here in the translation. It's not that they do not act, it is do act. The intent is not that the Kalim do act independently, heaven forbid. Have it?
We are on page 3, not 2.
Yeah, I'm sorry.
You said 2, so.
Oh, I'm sorry. So the bottom of page 3, and the right translation would go, the intent is not that the Kalim act independently, heaven forbid, as might be conceived from a superficial reading of the wording used by the Kabbalists quoted in the Ramak. Because he employs the following analogy, now on page 4. A king commanded one of his servants that when he sees a person who is proficient in his craft, he should give him presents of grain and wine. To another he commanded that when he sees a lazy person, he should beat him. So he has different ministers, and they get different types of jobs, and they, like this, they can convey God's or the king's energy in the right way, in the right situations. Thus the analogy continues that the king is not harming or benefiting with anyone with his own hand, and yet everything takes place through his commandments. So this analogy explains us how God takes care of everything at the same time. You know, like a very good CEO of a company. He knows how to, how you say, how you say that in English, to delegate. Yes, delegate is the word? Delegate different jobs to different people. So it's like him acting through these people. And he's smart enough to be able to set the right people for the right jobs, and everything is just going great. And he can do a lot of things at once because he delegates a lot of this, lot of the tasks. That's right. So thus the analogy continues that the king is not harming or benefiting anyone with his own hand, and yet everything takes place through his commandments. Similarly, in the analogy, God conveys influence to the emotional attributes to carry out their activities. So when God is merciful, who is being merciful? Chesed, the attribute of Chesed. When God is punishing, who is punishing and who is strict? The attribute of Gvura. But he does not change his activities. So the king can sit in his throne, in his palace. He doesn't do anything, and still the empire is running all good because the system is set up in a good way that everybody knows his job, the goals are set, the rules are set, and everything works fine. So similarly, God is sitting on his throne, and he can I'm tired. Gondvishani, how you say?
Providence.
He can provident his whole empire. He can take care of his empire without getting involved, without him being busy. Things like almost take care of themselves, and he can do his stuff. He can sit around and chat with his friends and drink a coffee, and still things happen in the way that they should happen. Right? So, by the way, just before we go further, it's clear that the reason why this analogy is given, because it tries to explain how there's no change in God himself, right? Because our problem is if God creates and he constantly deals with his creation, that seems very hard to understand how he doesn't change him, right? Because he's busy with his creatures. And actually the idea of knowledge in Kabbalah is that God actually acts through his knowledge. By him knowing his creatures, he's already acting with his creatures. So therefore, it's hard to understand how he doesn't get all caught up and busy with his creatures. Even if it's not a big deal for him, it's still something that draws him in, something that would change him. And what is the analogy explain us? No, he gave over all these jobs to his ministers, to these different forces, these different attributes, and they deal with the stuff, right? Let's turn the page. So according to this approach, reward and punishment are drawn from the emotional attributes independently, because it is not appropriate to ascribe either judgment or mercy to God, right? There's just, besides being the fact that it comes to explain how God doesn't change, it also comes to explain how God himself stays simple. He doesn't, he is not describable. If you would say that God is merciful, or he's upset, or he's judging, then you would ascribe different attributes, different characteristics to God himself. So no. God himself is simple. He just, when you see God judging, punishing, rewarding, it's not him doing it, it's his attributes doing it. If so, the emotional attributes are dispensing reward and punishment according to the nature of according to the nature with which the source of emanation, meaning God, implanted in them. Accordingly, it would appear, according to this approach, that God abandoned the earth to emotional attributes. And this is, heaven forbid, a contradiction to our faith and does not support it. So let me try to explain. This is something which we explained yesterday, but we are explaining it now a bit more in depth. If I say that God gets busy with us, meaning he judges us, he rewards us, he's upset at us, he's happy with us, so God is constantly changing, that I cannot say. I cannot say that first because it says in the script that God never changes, and I cannot say that because it doesn't cope with the idea of infinity. Because infinity includes the idea that he's undescribable. If you describe him, you actually and you're describing him in a certain way, the reason why God cannot change, because if in order to be changeable, you need to be describable. If you are undescribable, you're unchangeable, right? Because change is always a change in description. So I must say God is unchangeable and undescribable, because that's the definition of infinity. And therefore, I have a problem with the idea that God deals with his creation, or actually just even the creation itself is already a problem. So what do we answer for this question? We answer, he himself doesn't change. It's just through these mediums, through the attributes. But he himself stays the same. So everything happens through the mediums. So that means that God is not interested in the world? That means that God is not constantly being busy with our world? That is another problem. There's another problem theologically. Why? Because if I say that God is withdrawn from the world, that means that there is a space where there is no God. Then again, you're limiting him. Understand? If I say that the king, why does the king give over all these issues to his ministers? Because he cannot be everywhere at the same time. He cannot be doing one thing in one side of his empire and the other thing in the other side of the empire. He's a limited creature. So therefore, he leaves his empire to his ministers. I cannot say that God has left the creation. This phrase, God has left the creation, is a theological phrase that is mentioned and disagreed upon frequently in Jewish sources. We say, Ozav Hashem es haaretz, that the nations say, the belief of the nations is that God has abandoned the world. So nations say that. Well, we don't say that. We can't say that. Because if we say that, we are again limiting him. So again, we come back to this vicious circle. I finally learned this expression. Vicious circle. That on one hand, I cannot say he gets busy with the stuff himself, because then I'm changing him. If I'm changing him, that makes it, and he's describable, then he is limited because of he's describable. So if I say no, it's not him. It's a medium that he put in place, and these mediums act on their own behalf, and not him acting, then these mediums are the real rulers of our world, and he has left our world. He is not busy with our world. That would mean that you are again limiting him. You are saying that there is a place where there is this infinite God, and there is another place where he's not ultimately there. He's only he's only there through his mediums. So you're breaking him up to different levels. You're saying there is him himself, his essence, where he's really there, and there is a place where he is there, but only there through a medium, like a king. Where you say, the king is all over his empire. Melech shmoi nikra aleihem. There's an expression in the Talmud, or maybe even the script. A king's name hovers over his whole empire, right? Because he has such influence, power, that even when he's physically not in a certain place in his empire, they still feel him. They still, his name is constantly mentioned. So, he's all over, but still, he's not there with the same way as he is in his palace, right? So if I say God left the dealings of the creation in the hands of these mediums, and these mediums act on their own behalf, then I again have a problem with monotheism, because I'm basically saying that there is God in his essential way, and there is God through his mediums, which is not him himself. So how do we, and the problem is that in this description, which is mentioned in the Ramak, Rabbi Moshe Cordovero, from this Kabbalist, explaining what the attributes of the Sefirot are, it seems very much as he's basically saying this. He's saying the attributes act on God's behalf. So when God punishes, it's not God punishing, it's Midat HaGvura, the attribute of Gvura punishing. And when God rewards, it's not He rewards, it's the attribute of Chesed rewarding. But that is a problem. I cannot say that, because if I say this is a contradiction to our faith, as the Tzemach Tzedek says. It is evident to us that this Kabbalist is one who is permitted by faith. He's not going to say something which is against one of the principles of our faith. It is only that he did not have the proper wording to express the idea he desired to communicate when writing. Actually, this is still a quote from the Ramak. So, just for the text, for you understand. So, the Ramak, the Tzemach Tzedek in this text is quoting the Ramak, Rabbi Moshe Cordovero, a Kabbalist from the 15th century, and Rabbi Moshe Cordovero is quoting another Kabbalist. And Rabbi Moshe Cordovero says, this is what this Kabbalist wrote, but you should not misunderstand what he wrote. You should not think that he meant to say that actually these attributes are independent mediums that act on their own behalf, because that would be a contradiction to our principle of faith. No. This is not what he meant. He just didn't have the right wording. So, what did he mean? So, next page, page 6. Instead, the idea is that God brings about all the activities through the mediums of Kelim, as mentioned above. How? Jump down 2 lines. The Sephiros are complied of essential light and Kelim. The simple essential light encloses itself in these Kelim and brings about activity through them. Thus, the activities in truth come about because of the essential light and can therefore be ascribed to him. It is only that the reason for the limitations of the activity and the reasons for the variations are the result of the kelim, can be described to them. You understand? This is a major solution to this problem. We spoke about this yesterday. What do we say? We say, no, it is God himself acting. It's not that he left the acting in the hands of these mediums. No, they don't act on their own behalf. They just give a certain specification to God's energy. God's energy is in everything. Even in the most simple, the most minor thing, gets the same amount of godly energy, because if it wouldn't exist. And everything gets godly energy. Then why do we have different variations of existence, or different variations even of godly revelations? It's because this simple, unspecific, godly energy comes through a certain medium, and that medium changes the color and the specification of that energy. Right? We gave it a few examples yesterday. We said, similarly to the soul and the body. It's the soul acting in the body, but the actions look different. I look at the action of the eye seeing, or the hand holding, or the foot walking. It's the same energy. Is the same energy of the soul. What makes it differ? That in one place it should be walking, in another place it should be holding, and another place should be seeing? Just the vessel of the body. So when the energy encloses itself into the body, it's all the same energy. Similarly to, we said, this metaphor is unfortunately not mentioned in the Hasidic writings because there was still no electricity. But electricity is the same energy. It goes into a light bulb and it goes into a hot water machine. It's the same energy. What makes it differ? It's only the kli, the vessel which it encloses itself in. And finally, we also gave another example. We said like speech. So in speech, you have the idea and you have the words, the letters, the words. The letters and words are nothing to themselves. They are gibberish. They have no meaning. They have no life. They have nothing. But when the letters enclose in themselves the light of the speech, they become alive. They act. Who is acting here? The letters and the words? No. The person speaking with these letters and words. But it's getting a specification through these letters and words. So this is the idea of the kelim. Kelim are the medium through which God acts, but it's God acting. So why is this important to say? Because with this, we can have both. We can have God acting and not somebody else acting. So you're not limiting God and saying, oh, he's like a king sitting in a place, in a palace, and he's not acting himself, but his mediums and ministers are acting. No, it's him himself acting. And at the same time, it doesn't change him. The fact that he's acting doesn't describe him, because you're not describing him. Him is as he is, stays simple, and his reflection even stays simple. It's just the mediums through which he acts make that specification. It's pretty nice. I like this explanation very much. This is how we're going to get into the next topic, which is the idea of Ora and Shefa, which we discussed a few days earlier. Just before we do that, he's going to say the metaphor that we used yesterday with the body and the soul. Look here. The last line in page 6. Ramak further explains this concept by bringing an analogy from the life energy of the soul that encloses itself in the limbs of the body. We're turning the page. The life energy is simple when compared to the body, which is a composite of different limbs and organs. The life energy manifests in the eye, becomes expressed in the power of sight, and the life energy manifests in the foot become expressed in the power of walking. And therefore, these organs carry out different activities. With one, a person sees, and with the other, he walks. The reason for the difference stems from the difference in the limbs, the eye being different from the foot. The activity, however, comes from the true light of the soul manifesting in them. So you have the soul which always stays simple. It's untangible, undescribable, essential force, but its activities are describable and specific. Why? Because it acts through the body. And the body, with its whole complication, has different parts to it, and therefore it acts in different ways. This is what we said. We wrote down yesterday. We said that there is an argument there's a discussion in Kabbalah whether oiros are pshutim and kelim meguvanim. If the lights are simple and the vessels are specific, or even the lights are specific. And the consensus is that lights are simple, vessels are specific. Which means the godly light, the godly energy, no matter on which level it acts, always stays the same. It's always the same, simple, undescribable force. What makes it specific is the vessels it comes through. So, when you have look at here, the page 8 at the bottom, 3 lines from the bottom. Like the analogy of water whose color changes according to the color of the container in which it is held. The change of color is not genuine. It seems to you that if you pour a water into a container which is blue, the water looks blue. When you put it into a container which is red, the color of the water looks red, but it's not true. The color always stays the same. It always stays the same colorless. It just seems to you that it changed, but it didn't change. It just involves its immediate appearance. Okay. So now look at the middle of page 9. This is the ultimate perfection of faith, to believe that all of the different activities stem from Him with individual divine providence. But it still, look at page 10, nevertheless, we should also believe that in His essence, there is no change or activity. This is one of I just skipped a few words because it makes it simpler, but the idea is, on one hand, we should believe that it is Him acting in everything. On the other hand, we should believe it still doesn't make a change in Him. And now we will get into this idea of how is this possible? So how is it possible that you act, it's you acting, and it doesn't change you? So in order to understand this is where we're going to get into our second topic. So just to summarize our first topic. So the first topic was, God acts through these attributes, the Sephirot. What are they? These are mediums through which God acts. This first, most basic attributes of specification, because God Himself is simple and undescribable. Every description starts up from them. But they are not a medium. How are they a medium? They are not a medium that acts on its own behalf with an autonomous existence. It's God acting through them. And they are not an independent existence. They are not an independent medium. So then the question is like this. So what are we saying here? We're saying on one hand that God Himself is totally simple and He is undescribable. Why do we see God in our creation, or looking from our perspective with a specification? Like if He created this world, that gives Himself, also the Creator, a certain specification. Or God punishes, or God rewards. We see a specification in God. That's because of the mediums of the attributes, right? So, and we said, God acts through these mediums, but it doesn't change Him. He Himself stays the same. So in order to understand this, we will move on to our next topic, which is the difference between Or and Shefa, which I mentioned 2 days ago. We got a little taste of it. We're going to come back to it now and you will better understand it. So Or and Shefa. In order to understand this, now he will start to speak about what happens when you act. So why is it hard to understand that someone should act and should still stay undescribable? So let's see the example. On the basis of this understanding, we are page 10, middle of page 10. On the basis of this understanding, we must understand how there is no change in the source of emanation, which means God, despite there being variation in activities that God brings about. If you would say that it's not him acting, it's his independent mediums acting on their own behalf, I can understand that there's no change in him. But if you say that it's him acting, he himself acting, how come there's no change in him? In the analogy of a craftsman performing a task with a tool, the craftsman becomes actively involved. For it is necessary that his focus would be on this task. And when he performs another task with a different tool, he must undergo a change to concentrate his attention and focus on the new task. Right? When you're busy with a task, you're focusing yourself on that thing. This is what when we mentioned these three ideas we wrote them down, Mukdar, Murkav, and Mukhrach. So that we're speaking about the first two now. Mukdar is, we said, when you are, how do we translate it? Defined. When you act, thank you, when you act and you're focusing on a certain task, you are defined by that task. Because you are busy with that and you cannot be busy with a contradicting task, right? I cannot be welcoming and kind and strict at the same time. It's a contradiction. I cannot be giving you a present and hitting you at the same time. I'm giving obviously examples that are just not. But the idea is you're focusing and you're describable now by what you're acting. Because you're acting a certain thing that describes you too. So, when he performs another task with a different tool, he must undergo a change to concentrate his attention and focus on the new task. So, the question is, if God is acting, so when then is the process above that allows him What then is the process above that allows him to bring about activity and nevertheless not to bring him to change? As it is written, I have not changed. Okay, so this is the question, and this is how we lead up to this idea of Or and Shefa, of light and influence. So look, he says, the reason the Kabbalists referred to the drawing down of divine life energy with the term light, instead of using the term Shefa, influence, used by philosophers. On page 11, third line from the top. So in order to understand this, we need to understand the concept why the Kabbalists refer to the drawing down of divine life energy with the term light, or instead of using the term Shefa, influence. So, through this preface, clarification will also be achieved with regard to the concept that I conclude in the Finn's principle. It says, okay, whatever. I'm sorry, I just want to go to the... Go. So, look here. To explain, page 12. Page 12 on, like, a little above the middle of the page. The word Shefa refers to an activity that comes from an expression of force from the essence of the mashpia. It's very hard to translate the word mashpia. He gives here, mashpia means source of shefa. Shefa means influence or flow. So the mashpia is the source of the flow, or the one that gives the flow, or the one that gives the influence. Is there the influencer? Now we have the influencer. That's a word in the social media, so we can use it. So he gives influence, and he's the influencer. So the mashpia, again, let's read it. The word shefa, influence, refers to an activity that comes from an expression of force from the essence of the influencer, from the mashpia. To the extent that the mashpia himself is deeply involved and departs from his natural place and state, and invests his powers in giving rise to and bringing about this activity and Shefa. So I write a book. I cannot just write a book like offhand. I need to concentrate on this book. I have to think, well, what am I writing? I'm not just writing out of my, I don't know, pinky. It's concentration. I need to focus. What am I writing? What am I doing? So I'm going from my regular state, from my essence, towards doing something. This is a shefa. I invest power in it. Therefore, because he invests himself in the activity and gives of himself, he will undergo change. There is a difference between his state beforehand, when the mashpia was in his natural place, and afterwards, when he becomes an active source of shefa and is deeply involved. So the shefa, giving the shefa itself, first of all, describes me, right? It defines me, and it also changes me, because I'm not the same now as I was before. And basically the idea here is not that after I wrote the book I became a different person. It's more like while I am writing the book, I'm not the same person as while I was not doing anything. It changes me. I'm in a different state. Okay, we are on page 13. This refers to all type of tasks that are performed with one's hand and feet. The power of movement in his hands is expressed through the task until he becomes weary. You see that I become tired, right? Why do I become tired? Because shefa is tiring. It involves me. It draws me in. It doesn't just happen by itself. It's not an automatic process. It's something that needs my focus. So that's the idea of shefa. Shefa is something which I need to focus on. It defines me, it describes me, it changes me. And also, he doesn't speak about this here so much, but it's also murkav. Murkav means that it's complied of something. I cannot be focused on everything. I'm focused on one thing or a few things, but I'm not focused at everything at the same time, right? That's why the king cannot be in his empire everywhere. He's either in this place of his empire doing one thing or another place doing another thing. He can't be at the same time everywhere, because shefa is something which brings you in, it draws you in. It's not an automation. It's something that needs you to be there, and therefore it is something which is complied, something that's complied of certain things, and not certain other things, and therefore this is the idea of shefa. And even when we speak about spiritual stuff, so we spoke about physical now. So if I write or I build a house, both of them are shefa, and both in C, it brings me in, it draws me in, I become tired of it. But also when I speak spiritually, spiritual influence also works the same way. So look on page 13, in the middle of the page. Similarly, concepts apply with regard to conveyance of shefa from one's spiritual potentials, conveying intellect from one's power of wisdom. So in this instance, the essence of one's wisdom and intellect enclosed in one's brain is deeply involved regarding the intellectual influence. Therefore, the person will labor extensively deepening his conception of intellectual concepts. So, for example, when you are thinking of something, you're trying to understand something, you cannot be trying to understand something else. So you're focused on one idea. You can't be thinking of two ideas at once, right? They say that this was there is a description of the Rebbe, how he would answer letters. So thousands of people wrote letters to him, and till the Rebbe's heart attack in 1979, the Rebbe practically answered all letters. So today there's 40 volumes of letters of the Rebbe, printed. And also there's a lot of letters that are not printed. And there's a description, and he had 4 or 5 people working with him on the letters. And I think Rabbi Simpson, who was one of his secretaries, he describes that how would this answering letters work? And he describes the amazing capacity of the Rebbe, that he would be able, they would read the letters to him, and the Rebbe would answer the letter by heart, and they would write down the Rebbe's answer, then they would bring it into Rebbe, the Rebbe would correct it, and then would reprint it, and that's how they would send it. Now they would be reading a letter to the Rebbe, simultaneously a few letters. So for example, one secretary would read a letter to the Rebbe, while the Rebbe was giving instructions about another letter to the other secretary. So the Rebbe had the capacity to be listening to one thing and to be answering another thing at the same time. But that's very unique, right? There is a limitation to most people's capacities, how much you can be focused on, right? There's a saying about the Rogachover, who was a great genius, living like 100 years ago. They say that usually he had such gigantic intellectual capacities. To give an example, when you look at a wall, you're able to see, and you have to count the bricks. So you're not counting one by one, right? If you have a larger capacity, you can see like 4, 8, 12. You're seeing 4 bricks at once. So he was able to see like 150 at once. He'd look at a wall and would see how many bricks are there in one site, without counting. So a regular person would be able to see, let's say, 6 at once or 10 at once maximum. But he would see 150 once. Okay, but even him, there's a limitation, right? And even by the Rebbe, let's say, he would listen to one letter and answer another, but he wouldn't be able to listen to 3 and answer another 3 at the one. Because you need to be focused on the thing that you're doing, even when you're speaking about a spiritual capacity. Yeah. So that's the idea of Shefa. Shefa is, you get involved in it, it defines you, you're doing that and not something else, you become tired of it, it draws you, and you cannot be busy with it and with something else at the same time. And it is also, when you give over Shefa has to be, the influence needs to be complied of something. It's not just everything, right? These are the descriptions of Shefa. What about Or? So it says, the term Or, which is now on bottom of page 13, the term Or suggests the opposite to the above. Although shining forth light also involves drawing down energy from its source, it does so in a manner that does not bring about any activity or change within the source, and afterwards, the source remains the same as it was before it shined. Look at the sun. The sun gives light. To the sun, there's no focus on giving light. It's not that, I am giving light now to more space than I was before, so I need to concentrate more. For example, now there is a cloudy day here in Hungary, so there is no sunlight, not so much sunlight coming through, so the sun needs to work less hard, right? Work less. It's not so. It's just all the same for the sun, and it doesn't tire the sun, so-called. But let's give a human example. Besides Shefa, there's also Or, a reflection of a person, right? So Shefa is, I'm a great genius, and I have a very strong charisma. So I can be influencing people in two ways. I can be influencing people that I sit down with Michael and I start teaching him. So I have to focus on him. I have to think, what am I going to say? I need to decide what I'm going to say. I'm busy with him and not with you, and so on and so forth. That's Shefa. But there's also a way to influence in a way that I just walk around in the room and people see me and they're like, astonished. Just my reflection is so strong. Even if I'm not specifically doing it for you or for somebody else. I am who I am. And through being myself, I'm influencing people around me. It's not like I'm focusing on a person and not on another person. And you could influence people with just your existence. So this type of influence doesn't tire me, and it doesn't make me focused on one thing and one receiver and not the other. So this is a type of This is the type of influence which is meant by the description of or, of light. So, it does not matter, it does so in a manner that, yeah, we said that, I'm sorry. It remains in its place, so the source of light remains in its place, it doesn't need to move. Unlike in the example before, when I come to teach, I have my regular status, and now I need to change my status to the status of the teacher. I need to focus on teaching now. What's not so in the case of or, I am who I am. I don't need to do anything. The reflection just comes out. So, it remains in its place and level in the same manner for all the time. Even if it will shine over a broad expanse, the source of light will not become overtaxed, nor will it increase its strength if its shining is reduced. This is obvious from the example on a material plane, the luminary of the sun. The radiance that is drawn down from it does not bring about any change with it. The luminary of the sun itself is the same at all times, and its radiance is drawn down as a matter of course, for this is the natural propensity of the sun as created by God. Therefore, if it will be cloudy and the sun's radiance will not be drawn down into the world, its strength will not increase because of this, not increase or decrease. It's not like, I don't need to now shine on Verashmartut, so I have more strength now, because I don't need to give out my strength. Like if I don't need to teach you tomorrow, I'll be less drawn out because I could save my energy to myself. But if we're speaking about reflection, if my reflection comes through or doesn't come through, it doesn't make a change in me. I'm the same person. Okay, so now let's see this in the case of God. Similar concepts apply with regards to other Lemurian entities that I'm sorry. Look here, page 16, the bottom of the page. Similar concepts apply with regard to divine vitality with which he grants life to the worlds, from the highest level to the lowest levels. This flow does not involve his actual essence and being. Instead, it is like the radiance that extends from the luminary, which, as explained above, does not involve any change in the luminary, heaven forbid. Nevertheless, although it is only a radiance, this light is actually Ein Sof, and this is the representative of the source of the light. And therefore, it is him acting. I'm not going to read the whole thing now. So, this is why we say that he is, his energy is light. Okay, let's just summarize. So what we're saying is, God acts through this energy which is called light. Why do we call it light? Because this represents the idea that he doesn't get tired, he doesn't get changed, he doesn't need to focus on one and not to focus on the other. It's all just a reflection of him. Why does this become specific? It becomes specific because of the attributes of the Sephirot. Very nice. So, we answered this question. This is great. But then we have a problem. What is the problem? Who remembers what the problem with this description of or is? This explained. Now we are all happy. We can be more comfortable. We don't need to worry about the question. We answered everything. God himself acts, but he acts through his light. So it doesn't change him, because it's or, not shefa. The specification to the light comes because of the attributes. So all good and everything is good. What was the question we had though? We had a major question now on the flip side. Anybody remembers? Maybe Michael remembers. Remember? No.
Was I here?
No, but maybe remember from other studies that you had. I will be happy if I can say a novelty even to you. That's why I'm asking. What?
If he's living his creatures or not, or
If he's what?
he's living.
Leaving. No. No. That was another question, but not in this regard. That was a question before we explained that the attributes are not independent mediums, we had this question. But then we said, no, he doesn't leave. It's his light. It's not like he moved away and he just left everything in their hands. It's him acting. Oh, but if it's him acting, then why doesn't he change? Oh, he doesn't change because it's or, it's light, it's not shefa. Yeah, but there's a major problem. Why doesn't the or change the ma'or? Why doesn't the light change the source of light? Why? Because it's automatic. There's no decision making there. It just happens. Oh, so he must give up his light. You don't make a decision on whether you have a reflection or not. You are, and then you have a reflection. It comes together. There's no way you can say, oh, today I'm not going to have a reflection. It's not true. Because when you exist, you also have a reflection. The sun cannot decide one day, oh, today I'm not going to shine. I'm just going to turn off myself today. I'm going to take a break. I'm going to take a summer break. No, I'm going to take a break. There's no such possibility. And that's why it doesn't tire him. Anything that you make a decision of tires you. Right? Anything that you need to focus on one thing and not the other, it draws you in because you made the decision. But then it's not automatic. Anything that is automatic though, you cannot make a decision about. So then you have a problem. Wait, you're limiting God by saying that He must create. He must have a reflection. This was the problem which I mentioned first time we discussed this idea of Or and Shefa. And this actually was connected to your question that you asked, I think, last week. Why can't we just say that creation came out of Him automatically? There was no point where He created. You asked, why isn't creation constant? Like the existence should be constant. Why does the Bible say that creation started at a certain point? Why can't He just say it was always there? Similarly to, like the sunlight always comes out of Him. And we said, no, we can't say that. Because if we say that, we said, this is what Spinoza is saying, more or less. If we say that, then we are limiting him to say he must have a reflection. He cannot decide on not having a reflection. So this is the question he's going to say now. There is, however, a point that must be clarified. We're on top of page 19. For the analogy does not resemble the analog entirely. In the analogy, the ray from the sun emerges from it effortlessly, but also inevitably. There is no power within the sun to prevent its radiance from shining forth. In this aspect, there is an advantage to the mashpia who conveys sheva over the sun that gives forth radiance. For shefa from mashpia is dependent on his will. He decides whether to convey influence or not. So, and in truth, these two concepts are dependent on each other. Something which comes from one's own will requires his personal involvement. And something that doesn't need personal involvement doesn't come from your will. It comes automatically, right? Page 20 on the top. A ray that comes from a source of light, by contrast, emerges effortlessly. But also, the source of light has no choice. So if so, what is it by God? So you understand? So we say on one hand it's Or, and that's what in Kabbalah is always, the godly energy is always called Or. And why? Because we want to show that it's Him acting, but Him acting doesn't involve Him, doesn't mean His personal involvement. Oh, but if it's Or, then He he's forced to act. So he doesn't have a decision. Anything you make a decision of, you are involved in, right? If you don't make a decision, it could be automatic. But if you don't make a decision, and it's automatic, it means also you don't have a choice in making a decision. So how does it work here? So what does it say here? It doesn't really explain here. In some other places in Chassidus it explains the answer to this question. But first, let's read what he says here. So he says,
I'm sorry, what is mashpia? I forgot.
Mashpia is the source of influence, the influencer. So it's the expressions are, we have Or and Shefa. So we have Or and Ma'or. So that we have the light and the source of light. In contrast, you have Shefa, which is influence, and you have Mashpia, the source of the influence. So you can say that it's or because God is not involved in the give and go with energy. So therefore it doesn't change him, it doesn't describe him, it doesn't define him, it doesn't make him tired, there's no change in him. But then the problem is, or in contrast, is something which happens automatically. And this is why in the case of Shefa, it doesn't happen automatically. I make a decision to give you energy, and that's why it involves me. Just the decision in itself already involves me. So wait, so if God is or, the creation of God happens in the way of or, then why isn't that limiting him in the sense that he's forced to give or that or? This is our question what we're dealing with. So what does he answer here? He says, never mind about that, because this is only the case of human existence. That the or is on one hand doesn't involve you, but is also, you are forced to give off your reflection, your or. In the case of God, you could have or, which doesn't involve him, and doesn't change him. At the same time, he's making a decision about it. It's not forced. It's hard to understand, because we come back to the same question really. We're tackling the same question from all sides. Creation. Once, and I explained this before, that if I have something which is infinite and undescribable, and it makes something which is finite and describable, our world, then in a certain way, the infinite must also be describable. Because if he has a relationship, if an infinite, undescribable thing has a relationship to something which is finite and describable, it means he also must be a bit describable and finite. And I cannot say that about God, not only because of the script, but also logically, I must say that there is something. If I see things that are finite and describable, I must say also that there is something which is infinite and undescribable, because otherwise I wouldn't have an explanation why do I have things that are describable and finite. Okay, but I'm not, this is just as a side note. But this is the problem. The problem is, we see our world is describable and finite. We come to the conclusion that there is an infinite thing that it comes from. But if this finite thing comes from the infinite, it also describes him a bit, right? So this is the question we are saying. God is dealing with us. Oh, but it doesn't change him because it comes in a way of reflection. Oh, but wait, if it comes in a way of reflection, then he must do it. So it's a force on him? No, he decides on it. No, but if he decides on it, then he gets involved with us and it changes him. So we are coming back and forth the same question. So what do we say now? We say that he's acting in a way of he's acting in a way of light, not in a way of shefa, but his actions through the medium of or are not like or in the sense that he's not mukhrach. He's not forced to act. He's dependent on a decision. What does he answer? How can that be? We just explained that the whole idea of or is something which comes automatically. If it comes automatically, it's forced to happen. So it says, never mind. This limitation applies only with regard to created beings. God, by contrast, possesses both positive qualities. For all positive qualities emanate from him. Thus, the ray of divine light is dependent on his will. So he makes the decision, but it's still a ray of light. So it doesn't explain here how is that possible, or how we should imagine that. There is one explanation that I saw in other Hasidic works that is also a bit hard to understand, but brings this concept a little closer to us, to try to imagine how is it possible that something would be done willingly, but would still be in a way of light and not in a way of shefa. Would still be in a way that it doesn't change the source of light. So the explanation that's given is again the power of soul and in regards to body. So Hasidus explains, when the soul encloses itself in the body, it how you say eltet, how you say that? Vitalizes. Okay.
Yeah.
So it vitalizes the body automatically. It seems like there's no decision that, okay, now, today I'm going to live. No, while you live, your soul animates you, vitalizes you in an automatic fashion. And there's also no specific decision for the soul. Let me use the power of sight. Okay, I'm seeing now. Let me use the power of walking. No, it's something that happens. The capacity that is the life itself is something that happens automatically. Still, can you say that the soul is forced to give life? What was the word used? To animate. To animate. Can you say that the soul is forced to animate? No. Because if the soul would decide not to animate, it wouldn't. As we see also, that somebody that doesn't want to live, is not going to live for too long. He's going to die. So it happens automatically, but it is not in a way of force. That's the example of something which is or, but also has the quality of shefa. It is something that doesn't tire the soul, it doesn't involve the soul, it doesn't define the soul, and still it is not in a way that the soul is being forced to do. And this is how God creates the world. And actually this example of using a metaphor of the soul and the body for the godly energy and the creation is in the Talmud also. Shem she nefesh mechayas aguf, kacha kadosh baruch hu mechayas ha'olam. I think that's the quote. Is the same way that the soul revives, animates the body, so too God animates the world. Why is this being used as an example? Because of this. Because the best example into understand how the godly energy is in a way of light, but also has the quality of shefa, is through giving this example. And now we can have some questions. But by the way, he's going to say at the end, he says also that to understand this, how is it possible that God creates in a way that it's depending on his will, and at the same time it doesn't change him, ultimately comes to the same conclusion that we have come before, that ultimately this is something that cannot really be understood by human mind. And this is that one of the concepts of nimna hanimnois, that God includes in himself contradictory values, and it's something this is what you need faith for. This is why these are the type of things that you cannot understand of God, and this is why you need faith. Anyways, this is where we got up to till our break. Do we have any questions before we go to our break?
Does it sound outside like a distinction here between or Ein Sof and Ein Sof?
No, there's no. That's a different topic. In general, no, it doesn't make that. But but he just says that he doesn't. Definitely not along these words. He just says that there is the essence of God that reflects. In many places in Hasidus, the Ein Sof is the essence, and the Or Ein Sof is his reflection. In other places, explain that Ein Sof is already the reflection, and there's two levels in Ein Sof. In the reflection, there is the Atzmos, which is not the reflection, which is the essence, and then you have Ein Sof and you have Or Ein Sof. You have the Ein Sof, which is like, okay, I'm not going to get into it what it is, but anyways, mostly it doesn't make these distinctions. Any other questions? No, so then have a nice break. We'll continue soon.
Second week or